What happens to stadiums after the World Cup? One of the biggest events on the planet, the FIFA World Cup has 5 billion viewers worldwide. But what happens to the stadiums that are left behind when attention shifts away once more? We'll talk about the sad fate of the World Cup stadiums in South Africa, Brazil, and Russia today. And look at how Qatar intends to handle this and why they have already started taking down one of their stadiums. Qatar has constructed a complete World Cup infrastructure over the past 10 years, including modern stadiums, cutting-edge training centers, and improved transportation systems. They spent an absurd amount, more than $200 billion, all told. Due to the fact that Qatar had to construct the majority of this infrastructure from scratch, this is significantly more than any other host has ever spent. Brazil spent $20 billion in 2014, compared to Russia's closer to $16 billion 4 years earlier. The event will be over in less than a month, so even $20 billion is a significant sum of money. Countries anticipate that the World Cup infrastructure will provide long-term benefits in addition to attracting global attention. Formerly desolate areas could be given new life by the transportation links, and stadiums could start to break even by hosting events and concerts. It's a bold, energetic space that has outlived its original function, but this isn't always the case. The history of World Cup stadiums does not present a positive picture. We'll discuss Qatar's other plans later, but let's first take a look at what they're working so hard to avoid. So what occurred in past World Cups? Russia upgraded 3 existing venues and built 9 new stadiums in preparation for the 2018 World Cup. It's difficult to estimate how much all of this cost, but it was a sizable portion of the $16 billion that Russia spent on the competition overall. Russia made the choice to lease these stadiums to national football teams after the World Cup. It was an obvious choice because these stadiums were built to hold games, and the revenue from ticket sales would help cover operating expenses. But it didn't work. The majority of Russia's teams had trouble selling even half of the tickets for their games due to the poor fan support they receive. The home team draws an average of 6,000 spectators to the Sochi Olympic Stadium, or just 15% of the stadium's capacity. Due to the low attendance, it is challenging to pay the operating expenses. Taxpayers are paying for the stadium's financial leaks. They've been called white elephants, as well as pricey, useless, and burdensome. When the Kaliningrad Stadium started to turn into a swamp a year after the World Cup, it almost cost $1 million to save it. Financially speaking, it would have been better to simply allow the Kaliningrad Stadium to collapse. Of the 9 new stadiums in Russia, only one has a prosperous afterlife. The Kazan Arena has been transformed into a multi-use space that hosts sporting events, musical performances, auto shows, and fashion shows. It is also furnished with dining establishments, bars, and hotel rooms. Maybe that's the secret to successfully reimagining the stadium in the long run. And in other nations, was it the same? Brazil, whose stadiums share a similar narrative, hosted the World Cup 40 years before Russia. Thousands of seats are empty because most of them are used by domestic teams. Despite the fact that Brazil is a passionate soccer nation, its stadiums are simply too big to be filled. The Arena da Amazônia, located in the outlying city of Manaus, is the most striking example. Although there are supposed to be 40,000 seats in the stadium, the home team only draws crowds of up to 1,000. Over $200,000 per month is lost due to the alarming rate of leakage. Another World Cup venue, Estadio Nacional, has recently been converted into a bus shelter in a desperate attempt to cover costs. The Arena das Dunas is currently making an effort to make money by hosting weddings and kids' parties. When we take into account the fact that some of these stadiums only hosted 4 World Cup games, it sounds even worse. Was it worth it to watch football for only 6 hours? Taxpayers in Brazil disagree. A quarter of the population is in poverty, and they would prefer to see their taxes used in other ways than to fund losing stadiums. Brazilian journalist José Cruz succinctly put it in 2015. The only World Cup legacy I can see for Brazil is the debts we have inherited. South Africa hosted the World Cup 4 years ago. These stadiums are performing a little bit better than those in Brazil and Russia. The Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban is now used for a variety of events. Visitors can take a skycar to the top of the central arch and even try some bungee jumping in addition to attending events and music concerts. Not every stadium in South Africa is a success. There have even been calls to demolish the 65,000-seat Cape Town Stadium, and it might only be a matter of time. The stadium has never made a profit. Following the controversy surrounding their World Cup bid, Qatar is determined to avoid the mistakes of previous tournaments. Almost 30 FIFA officials were forced to resign as a result of corruption and bribery allegations. When Amnesty International revealed serious exploitation of migrant workers in 2013, things only got worse. Many of these workers received pitiful wages or no pay at all and were compelled to perform physically demanding jobs. According to a 2021 inquiry by the Guardian newspaper, more than 6,000 workers had perished in Qatar since their country's World Cup bid. The nation's reputation has suffered significant harm on a global scale overall. Their plans for the World Cup stadiums after the competition is over are about the only thing they haven't faced criticism for. What plans does Qatar have for its World Cup venues? For a nation the size of Qatar, 8 enormous stadiums would be absurd to have. To put things in perspective, there are 400,000 Qataris living in the country. While this is happening, the stadiums can accommodate 420,000 people. Brazil has 220 million residents compared to 140 million in Russia. Qatar won't have a chance if these nations can't fill their World Cup stadiums. Qatar, however, is not going to try to fill them. Instead, they want to change them. Modern, multi-use stadiums will be built out of the 2 biggest ones, Lusail and Al Bayt. The majority of the seats at Lusail Stadium will be removed to make room for stores, cafes, a school, a medical clinic, and possibly even some apartments. Similar transformations will take place at Al Bayt, where a hospital, a shopping center, and a 5-star hotel will be built. The field will remain in the center of the other amenities in both stadiums. Nevertheless, it will serve primarily as a venue for civic gatherings rather than games of professional football. Football matches will still be played in 3 more stadiums, Ahmad bin Ali, Al Janoub, and Al Thumama Stadium, but only after drastically shrinking the venues. The capacity will be reduced from 45,000 to 20,000 in each of the 3 situations. By taking away the temporary seating, Russia also employed this tactic. Ekaterinburg Central Stadium's end is congested with temporary stands. The temporary seating will be provided by Qatar to other nations that wish to upgrade their sporting facilities. The smaller 20,000-seat stadiums probably won't be able to fill up, because the Qatari Football League occasionally only draws crowds of a few hundred people. But the most creative solution of all is Stadium 974. This stadium is the first of its kind in World Cup history and is entirely temporary. It can be completely disassembled and rebuilt elsewhere. It was built from 974 recycled shipping containers. It's a groundbreaking strategy for sports infrastructure that upcoming World Cups might use. A set of temporary stadiums could be transported from location to location rather than new stadiums being built in each host nation. Qatar also intends to host some future events using the World Cup infrastructure. Brazil used 5 of its former World Cup stadiums when they hosted the Summer Olympics in 2016. However, after the Olympics, the situation remained largely unchanged. The Asian Cup, an international football competition for teams from Asia and Oceania, will be held in Qatar in 2024. In addition, they will host an international athletics competition with more competitors than the Olympics in 2030 and the Asian Games. They intend to reuse as much of their World Cup infrastructure as they can in both of these situations, ensuring that the projects are not wasted. Additionally, they have set their sights on possibly hosting the Olympics in 2036. Whether any of these strategies will succeed, only time will be able to determine. However, one of them is already active after hosting a game between South Korea and Brazil. The Stadium 974 deconstruction process began on December 5th. According to rumors, the stadium's components will be transported to Uruguay, which aspires to host the 2030 World Cup. Do you believe that using portable stadiums like this for future World Cups is a good idea? Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.